All right, everyone, we have big, staggering news today. Link in the description, archived, of course. If this does end up going through, number one, it'll be legally embattled. You already know that. We've seen this a number of times in the last month. Number two, it would be a huge win if it's upheld. Donald Trump may be destroying the Department of Education. Now, liberal commentators, of course, are saying, oh my God, Donald Trump wants your kids to be stupid. That's not the case, actually. The Department of Education has only been around for about half a century. Believe it or not, we had an educational system before that, and it was a better educational system. The Department of Education didn't exist in the golden age of the 50s and 60s when educational attainment, generally speaking, was better. Now, having some standardization for education is fine. The problem is that the Department of Education, subjugate to the executive branch generally, and programs that it enacts and so forth generally dumb down standards. What we've seen, for example, with DEI, the idea of equity, for example, in theory, and on paper, according to the people who support it, equity is about uplifting people at the bottom in order to help them compete with the top and give everyone, better education. I mean, in this context or in general. But really what it's about is taking the top and pushing it down. That's really what DEI ends up doing. We've seen this, for example, in some West Coast areas where they've eliminated AP courses. That's really going to be helpful. So this kid who has a 4.5 GPA and is a goddamn genius and a total nerd who tinkers around with electro experiments at home in his own laboratory is not allowed to take science at the AP level, get college credits thereby because he's a genius, and then go on to college and pay less money. That's probably what it's about. It's more about the money, I think, than anything else. It's the dumbing down of America. Educational standards in this country peaked in the 1940s and 50s. Since then, out of necessity, partially, everyone wanted to blow up atomic bombs and stuff like that. Since then, when the Department of Education was incepted under Jimmy Carter, which was one of his biggest mistakes, standards have fallen. And then you have Common Core, which is mentally retarded. You have No Child Left Behind, in other words, No Child Left, that's what I like to call it, under Bush. That lowered standards. And the educational attainment rate has steadily declined over this period of time for half a century. Education is simply not as good as it once was in the United States. Now, if the Department of Education were doing its job, you would think over the course of 50 fucking years, over the course of many people's lifespan, they would have fixed the goddamn problems that were mounting. But no, they're not interested in that. Instead, all the Department of Education does is ensure that teachers that aren't doing their jobs can never be fired. It's a real big problem in the country because we don't have as literate a workforce. We don't have as well trained a workforce. And really, a lot of people, and they are fundamentally correct, are telling kids, you shouldn't even bother going to college, go into the blue collar field, go into some sort of skilled labor. You could probably make more money anyway in some of those jobs. You realize how much a trained electrician can make? A freelance plumber? They'll be able to make the rent. It's not going to be a problem for them, generally speaking. This is almost too much winning. It's like when Trump said, oh, we're going to win, 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 and win some more. And you're going to get tired of the winning and say, no, Trump, we're winning too much. And I'll say, no, we've got to win more. To that effect, basically. Um, that would be a huge win. And when people see, and this is what Trump is doing, like he's planning to fire, what, 80,000 IRS agents or something like that as well. So there's another big win, assuming again it goes through. The liberals are now using lawfare against Trump to try to stop his executive actions, even over agencies over which he has direct purview. And judges are complying with that basic premise in order to drag things out over and over and over. There's like 5 or 6 different cases going on right now. They're resorting to attempting to use judiciary power at this point. What he's trying to do is show Americans you can live without all of this bureaucracy. It's no longer necessary. In this current economic situation and social situation, that number of bureaucrats is simply not needed. You don't need to be paying extra taxes to fund their lifestyle. They can find private sector jobs. They're capable of doing so. He is fundamentally correct. The kind of bureaucracy that was built up during the Cold War and was at times necessary is no longer. The FBI, for example, as Razorfist has pointed out several times, he's fond of doing so, was originally incepted to be a temporary agency to deal with crime, to deal with bootlegging and things like that. Once Prohibition ended, it was no longer really necessary now, was it? But it's still there. And it has become a too big to fail bureau. And that Trump is looking at these bureaus and saying we need the Department of Education. Let me ask a question. Why? Trump is asking a question that many of us have been asking anyway. Why is it necessary? What function is it actually serving? Has the Department of Education actually educated people? No, the educational attainment's dropping off a friggin' cliff. There are third world countries with higher educational attainment, if I remember correctly. Well, that's real helpful. Yeah. Richest country in the world can't even educate kids. My new tech exclusive of the day will be about how Iowa effectively prosecutes people for microschooling, by the way. Yeah, apparently, if you homeschool more than four unrelated children, you can go to jail in the state of Iowa. Um, this is a problem. This needs to be changed. Ultimately, in the United States, we should be moving, insofar as you're capable of doing so. If you have a child in the United States, homeschool them as much as possible. They're not learning jack shit in school these days anyway, unless it's a really good school. And most public schools, let's face it, really aren't. That's why illiteracy is rising in the US. I mean, we're going in reverse. We should be moving towards a more perfect union now, shouldn't we? A more perfect nation. It seems we're failing at this endeavor now, doesn't it? Education is a huge part of it. Even you look at the attainment drop after the lockdown-arist period. I wonder why. Oh, you can't actually do lab sciences now? Well, screw you. That's going to raise a generation of really, really skilled scientists. Basically, unless the kid has a home laboratory or something like that and is studying on their own, it's going to be a problem. This is why I believe in mixing education with play. So if kids are given books that they want to read, they're going to build their literacy faster than if you force them to read the fucking Gay Gatsby. If kids are given scientific equipment, experiments, like my mom promulgated this in me. She had a whole folder, she probably still has it, of like clip outs and stuff like that from magazines, newspapers and stuff with science experiments and stuff like that, scientific articles. And I became obsessed with science for quite some time. I always did well in the classes related to science. Like that one time, Mr. Stayhauer, God bless his soul, uh, practically put me in charge of the goddamn class because I was the only one that knew how to use a microscope. That was a fun day. Yeah, I had temporary friends that day. I was not well liked in school because, of course, I would be edgy and, insult people and stuff like that and act out. But, when it came to science class, everyone needed my help for a while. Mm, that was a fun day. One of the best days of my life, actually. Stayhauer was a cool teacher. I'd get dressed down by all the other teachers. He had no problem with it. Probably thought I was funny. He had a little bit of a weird sense of humor himself. I believe he's dead now, so I'm allowed to talk about him. It's been a long time since I was in, the fifth grade. So get rid of the Department of Education. I strongly encourage and support this. The educational attainment rating of the United States will probably begin to rise again and never again lock down the country on bullshit pretenses and prevent people from being able to learn in person. Now, of course, for some things, remote learning is fine. English. Okay, well, here, you're going to have to, you get an email. Here, you have to write an essay on the book. Here's the book. And, you can read it. And then, give a brief synopsis and name the characters and stuff like that. It sort of depends on the grade. Same with college, actually. It depends on the course. And ultimately, for people that are like severely autistic or very introverted, I'm on the latter, um, doing some remote learning sort of makes sense. But at the same time, there are some things you have to do in person. Lab sciences, for example. Generally speaking, people don't have a home laboratory. I wish I had one. I should set one up in the other room. Have a little lab space so that the next time that I get a cut, I can stare at my blood in the microscope like I did as a kid. Oh boy, those were fun times. But destroying the Department of Education ultimately would be a good thing. What likely would happen is we'd save a shit ton of money, and all of a sudden, educational attainment would begin inching upwards because the states are better equipped to generally handle it anyway. We can always pass various legislation to oversee broadly education, but it doesn't need to be federalized. It really doesn't. Also, the economic situation in different states is different, and so the kind of education can be tailored to that fact. It makes more sense. It's more localized, it's more efficient, it's less costly, just makes sense from top to bottom. That's about all. Peace out.